Hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of iSampleU with me, Dean, aka Dino Beats. I got a lot of positive responses to episode 1, so I'm super excited to be bringing you guys a second episode. If you missed episode 1, the idea of this project is that I'm collecting audio files of any kind, whether it's instrumental tracks, vocal acapellas, or even just fun old phone recordings, and then turning them into some kind of beat. The submission for episode 2 came from my good friend Nate Kim. Let's see what he had to share. The way I started this beat is I brought the sample directly into Logic and used the Varispeed function to slow down the whole track.
I've waited patiently for you to come to me, and
Then I went through and chopped up the sample on some of the major beats so that I could export it to a sampler instrument and play it on the keyboard. Then I went through and I found a pattern that I thought sounded pretty good and entered that on the piano roll. Then I bounced that loop out and started doing some processing on the audio file that was created out of it. So I decided to start out by just pitching the sample down another half step. Then I used the FabFilter Pro Q3 plugin to duck some of the muddiest low end and some of the most harsh high end, and a little bit around 3700 Hz to get even more of the brittleness out of the sound. Then I used the Waves CLA3A compressor to give the audio a little bit more of dynamics and a little more punch. Next I used the FabFilter Saturn plugin to give it a little bit of saturation, the warm tape saturation in the lowest band and the low mid band. Next I put on the Waves Doubler plugin to give it a little bit more stereo depth. Then I added the C1 compressor sidechain to the kick drum so that every time the kick would hit, the sample will duck out of the way. And last, I tossed the J37 tape emulator on it to give it a little bit more tape saturation. Then I went into my BBC Symphony Orchestra by Spitfire Audio just to add a little more violin to the sample to beef it up a little bit more. Then I started with the drums, so I first did the kick drum, and the plugins on that are just the CLA76 compressor, the T-Rax Classic Clipper to give it a little more analog saturation, and then I used the Waves Smack Attack to give it a little more punch. Next I added a snare, and that just has a slight EQ to duck some of the really muddy frequencies and some of the really harsh ones. I also used the CLA76 compressor on this, and again Smack Attack to give it a little extra oomph. Then I added a hi-hat with some more subtractive EQing, and again the CLA76. I also added a reversed crash cymbal sound so that it would swell up right to the beginning of the beat. For the bass, I used the Waves Bass Fingers instrument, which has a lot of awesome electric bass type sounds. Here it is by itself. With the CLA bass plugin that I added. With a little compression on top. Then the Waves Bass Rider plugin so that each note is a little bit more consistent just in volume. And some more sidechain compression with the kick. But after making all that, I thought the groove was pretty nice, but I didn't think that the beat was done. So I felt the need to make a second section. So what I did next is I took one little chunk of the sample and looped it as an intro to the next section. Then I took that same sound and put it into the quick sampler and played it at half speed but way up on the keyboard, so it kind of sounds like this. But I thought that sounds way too harsh, so I added a little analog EQ. I did the Wave CLA 2A compressor. I added the FabFilter Pro Q3 to duck out some of the low end. Added a sidechain compressor with the C1 compressor, and added the Echo Boy from Sound Toys. And with all those effects on it, this is what that sounds like. And I brought that sound in later in the beat, but just down another octave. Next, I added a kick, a snare, a second snare, some hi-hats, and an 808 that I made using the ES2 synthesizer. That's pretty much everything I did for this week, so without further ado, here is the beat for episode 2 of iSampleU. Well, that's all I have for this week. Thank you guys again for tuning into episode 2 of iSampleU. I'm still collecting samples for this series, so if you're interested in submitting something, please email it to productionbydino@gmail.com. But that's all for this week, so I'll catch you guys on the flip-flop.